You know,
because
people are still going to tow regardless, right?
we're as divided as ever. If we can't agree on bathrooms, how are towing companies ever going to agree on what is right and what is wrong?
I just feel bad for our American listeners that don't give a shit about what's going on in Ontario.
I think some of them will appreciate and probably have input based on, like, this isn't fully new. It's new to us.
Hey everyone, I'm Brad from Calgary.
This is Sean from Cambridge, Ontario.
I'm Terry from Cornwall, Ontario.
Hey, this is Larry from Pitt Meadows, British Columbia, and you're listening to the Towing Life podcast.
Welcome to the Towing Life podcast, where the ditches are deep, the trucks are loaded, but the drivers are not. I'm your host, TowManG, and as usual, I'm joined by my co-host, friend, and former co-worker, the man with very strong opinions, Mr. PlainGuy.
What is going on, G? What is going on?
Oh, my head hurts. My head hurts. I've been reading, which I don't normally do, to prepare for this episode. And I think I've read more in the last 48, 72 hours trying to come up with things for this episode. I think I've read more in the last 72 hours than I have all of last year.
I was gonna say, is that one of those lame New Year's jokes?
No.
But yes, welcome to the Towing Life podcast, to a wonderful new episode 124.
Mm-hmm.
We thank you for joining us once again. If it is your first time here, welcome. You picked the worst episode to join in, unless you are in the province of Ontario.
Yeah.
If you are listening from anywhere else, we appreciate you checking in just as much. However, be warned, this episode is going to contain information that, I mean, could future affect different areas, but for now is new regulation, new implementation that has come to the province of Ontario. It has been a lot of the chatter going on social media, on a lot of Canadian towing pages, a lot of misconceptions, misinformation. Everyone's kind of all over the place. What does this mean? What do I have to do? So we're here to do our best to try and push what is the TISSA Act coming into Ontario, and give you a general idea of what, things you may be missing or things you need to start thinking about moving forward. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns for the show, where can you reach us? It is simple. You can head over to www.towinglife.ca. You can find us on Facebook at the Towing Life Podcast. You can email us directly at thetowinglife@gmail.com. Or if you're listening over on the YouTube side, you can go ahead and comment down below. Don't forget, while you're there, to hit the like, subscribe, all of that good stuff. It does good for the algorithm. It helps promote the show. And 124 episodes in and continuing to grow. I'm very proud to say that it is due to the help of each and every one of you that tune in every week.
Yeah. Or you could just not listen to us for like a month and a half and then just get all caught up in 2 days when you're busy. That's fine.
Yeah, then my stats peak and I can't figure out why.
Yeah.
That happens quite regularly. I think a lot of our listeners will tell us that, hey, I'm 4 episodes behind, 5 episodes behind, or hey, I just tuned in, I'm going to go back and check out some old episodes, right? Because when you find us, you normally find our most recent work.
Yep. Which
so
is good. I don't really want them to be promoting episode 1 to the public.
No.
God.
No. I still cringe when the odd time go back.
The first 10 episodes were like, ugh.
Oh, the first 10 episodes were us more than just trying to find our voice. It was just trying to find everything to do with this show. It is good. It is awesome to look back and see how far we've come.
The beginning of anything new, there's always learning curves and there's always hiccups and speed bumps, and it's never right the first time. And I think that segues perfectly into the TISSA Act.
Exactly. Yeah. Absolutely. So, just like G himself, who has finally started to figure out how segues properly work. Things come in time with changes and everything going into it. So we'll hop right in. I've got no quarrels about it. Qualms, I don't even know what those words mean. Ontario has announced, well, not announced. Okay, I want to get this misconception out of the way right away. This isn't new. The TISSA Act has been in the works forever, and the legislation has been sitting there waiting to come into effect. And it just happened to come into effect January 1st, 2024. So what is the TISSA Act? the TISSA Act, which I'm going to pull up just to make sure I don't get any of the wording wrong. The TSSEA Act is the Towing and Storage Safety and Enforcement Act of 2021. It ain't new.
Hmm.
It is a program and with legislation put in by the government to finally have some teeth against the towing industry.
Yep.
Right? We have covered on this show episodes of shootings, corruption, everything going on tend to be in or around the GTA, but let's not, be coy here. This is also spread to other parts of the province, other bigger cities in the province, right? This is no longer an exclusive problem to Toronto. It happens in Ottawa. It happens in all these little towns outside of Toronto, like along the 401 corridor. It happens in more places than you would think. However, where it doesn't happen is in rural Ontario, which is going to really hurt with the new regulations that are being put in place by the government. So
100%.
again, it is regulations that were put in so that the government could finally have some control and some teeth over the industry. There is concerns that we will get to. And that is that, unfortunately, as much as the government needed that ability to enforce, right? And a lot of people will pick a specific line in the regulation. There's some that we'll even go over on this show and go, this is terrible. That isn't going to apply every day, but that has to be written in. Right? Like we have the ability to change permissions of the director and that has to be there, or they could never change the definition of the director's task and evolve this into something into the future. Right? It's what they do with that information and with that regulation that fears the industry.
Yeah.
But it's not the be all end all. It is not, this is coming into, this is not brought in to kill the towing industry in Ontario. It is actually absolutely going to have an effect on the towing industry in Ontario, but it is not here to kill. We need to remember when we talk about any of this today, and gee, this is a point that I'll bring up to you, and it's something that I've had to remind many people. This regulation, these regulations, because there's multiple regs that go along with the TSSEA Act, have been brought in to eliminate predatory towing. That is the main function of this act. And I think that we can all agree, every tower in the province can agree, other than the ones performing the predatory towing practices, can agree that that needs to happen.
Yep.
That is change that has been overdue in the industry. The fear is anytime you have a regulation that is written with the help of insurance companies and roadside companies, and roadside companies, that it is not going to benefit the towing industry. I'm not saying that it's all bad. I'm just saying I haven't seen anything in this act yet that has protected the towing industry. So, what is TISSA? Right? The Towing and Storage Safety Enforcement Act. It is an act put out that implements a director to overview the entire province. So we, in Ontario, previously, select municipalities have gone ahead with licensing programs through the municipality, right? We ran into that around the GTA. You could get a license for York. You could get a license for Toronto. You could get a license for Markham. You could get a license for these regional areas, which allowed you to operate within them.
Yep.
And it was mainly for the purpose of picking up a vehicle in that area. Just like the TSSEA Act, it did not stop you from driving through the area or dropping a vehicle in the area. But it stopped you from being able to pick it up. What that did is it allowed the townships to put place in, or the towns, cities, whatever they were at the time, to put in rules in place to help with predatory practices. The problem is that rules and regulations in relation to that changed from town to town.
Yep.
There was not a standard that was quite set out. There was a lot of resemblance between them, and it did not apply to every town or every city in the province.
A truck going down the road with 5 different license plates on it, plus the Ontario license plate to drive on the roads, because of all these different municipalities that they have to work at.
Right. So, and what that did is it had an effect in those areas. Might not have fully worked. And again, it was who was enforcing it.
Yep.
Well, the people that were enforcing it could pull a municipal plate from a towing company. And that towing company would just move to the next municipality, or move to a municipality with no bylaw, or with no requirements of such. So the Ontario government has taken that over from municipalities and enforced it across the entire province.
Mhm.
What it means is every towing operator, and operator in this case is referred to as the towing company,
Yep.
is the
We are
operator.
now just drivers, my friends.
Yep.
We are dumb drivers. We are no longer operators.
Every towing operator, every storage facility operator, and every tow truck driver are going to be required to have a separate license. So the
Mhm.
company has a license, and each of its drivers must maintain a license.
Yep.
This license is handed out by the province of Ontario, and there is a requirement of guidelines that it needs to be met in order to receive a license.
Mhm.
Right. And again, right, I know you talked about, and we do have some slides to go over on what it says the requirements are.
Mhm.
Right. And there's going to be little wording in there that might kind of tip you off a little bit, but at the same time, that's just it's a requirement.
Yep.
It's not the be all end all. So what this has done is that if the province does not like the way in which you operate,
Mhm.
they reserve the right to suspend, not renew, or just, not issue, suspend, or fail to reissue a certificate to a driver, operator, or storage facility.
Mhm.
Right? That is the teeth that the government needed, because this is not just like, I'm going to fine you if you don't follow the rules. I can literally take away your ability to operate a tow truck in the province of Ontario.
Yeah. Which
Right?
is scary. Very
So
scary.
100%.
Yep.
100%, depending on how that program is managed and how
Mhm.
complaints are handled, because I imagine a lot of it is going to be on a complaint basis.
Mhm.
Because the government, unless you are proactively sending out inspectors to different towing companies or to scenes of everything else, is going to be very hard. So it's going to be a lot of complaint based from whether it be the public, the consumer, the insurance companies, the roadside companies, and any of the such.
Well, I
Right?
think one of the big things right now that we're seeing pushback is just the way they're implementing it, right? So they're coming out with this rate sheet, the maximum rate sheets that you're allowed to charge, and essentially the 15th of
Yes.
January, which would have been yesterday when you're watching this.
Yes.
You have until the 31st of January to have your rates submitted, or it goes to zero on the
Yes.
government's
Yes.
website. So you have 15, 16 days to figure out what the top dollar is that they're allowing you to charge and what your flat rates are going to be across the board.
No,
No?
that is a misconception. You are
Okay.
required to submit to the government
Mm.
a maximum rate schedule
Yep.
based on the breakdown in which they provided, which the breakdown is flawed, and we will get to that.
Mhm.
Based on that is a maximum rate schedule. That is not a flat rate for a tow.
Mm.
That is a flat rate maximum,
Mm.
right? So, and this is very important for anyone listening who, obviously, I hope you haven't submitted yet unless you've really done your homework at the time of airing. The government, as part of this program, has required to post a maximum rate schedule for your business. And
Yep.
that maximum rate schedule will be available to the public and must be given at times of tow and or storage,
Mhm.
right? And we'll get into the whole consent thing. However, that maximum schedule is exactly that. It is a maximum.
Mm.
So you are not setting what your maximum or what your base rate is for a tow. You are setting what they classify as a tow service, and they have broken it out into such a way that is
Stupid.
borderline ridiculous, and that
Yeah.
is a big problem with the industry right now, and
Mhm.
probably the biggest fight that needs to be taken to the government is it's broken down into towing and recovery.
Mhm.
Sounds pretty simple.
Yep.
Makes sense, right? The province has fought for years that we want itemized billing. We want,
Mhm.
clarity on this. We do not just want it's $700. Why? Oh, well, okay, it's this much for the call out, it's this much for the recovery, it's this much for the winching, it's
Mhm.
this much for the flatbed, it's this much for the cleanup. We've done that. The
Yep.
government said, hey, you need to be more transparent in your billing practices. We went, okay, no problem.
Mhm.
Right? We were consistent with our billing. The government said you can't charge differently based on who's paying. No problem. We did that.
Yep.
Right? We started being consistent with our billing. We started to, you know, our business for sure is that we would not charge for a winch if I didn't have a photo of it in a ditch.
Mm.
Right? Where I'm sure there was companies, again, predatory towing practices that were out there doing it. So this maximum rate goes against everything the government has asked for in the past because they want a maximum flat rate for a tow service, not including mileage. This applies to heavies and lights. And why that is important and scary at the same time is most heavy towing companies have built their billing practices around an hourly based service.
Yep.
Right. I know when you get into the States, there's dollar per pound. There's
Mhm.
price per pound that has a lot of it. Up here, it is a lot of hourly. So it is this much an hour from the time the truck leaves port to port, truck gets home, right?
Yep.
That is no longer existent on their rate schedule. Their rate schedule for heavy towing is a maximum base rate, and that can include everything,
Yep.
and a kilometer rate. So it has completely changed the way in which the government wants us to bill for our services, and having us recalculate how that
Mhm.
affects and run scenarios and make sure that we're not losing out on this deal. So yes,
Yep.
you are required to supply a maximum. So that maximum, and here's why that is scary. You supply for your light duty, and now it breaks the vehicles down into vehicle weight classes,
Mhm.
right? Just like most things do, right? Roadsides do this. Everyone does this. If it's between this many pounds and this many pounds, it's light duty. If it's this to this, it's mid. This to
Yep.
this, heavy. Same thing. So that maximum base rate that you need to submit to the government, which they can refuse,
Mhm.
right? And we haven't seen it hasn't been submitted yet,
Yep.
right? There's only 15 days to submit this. And
Mhm.
I think that was done with a purpose. But this maximum rate has to be, if you are a business, you have to incorporate everything. You have to incorporate, okay, what is my accident rate, my zero priority when the police call me rate? What is my winching rate? What is my flatbed? What is my specialty equipment for skates? What about traffic control?
Mhm.
Right? Because the government says you can only charge for services that are listed on your maximum schedule rate. So if traffic control isn't included in there, which I don't think under regular towing it is, you need to incorporate that into the base rate, because when your bill gets dissected,
Mhm.
that maximum number on that bill cannot exceed what you have submitted to the government.
Yep.
So do not go, I don't care who you are, do not go and submit your maximum as $100,
Hmm.
right? Because, and that's what a lot of people are going to think, well, it's $100 for hookup.
Yep.
Okay, but think about that. That is going to include your winching.
Yep.
I'm not saying you have to charge your maximum. There's going to be some idiot that's going to do it. Oh my God, it's going to go badly.
Hmm.
Right? I'm not saying charge your maximum for Betty Boop that's broken down in the Walmart parking lot and needs to go 2 miles up the road to the shop. You
Mhm.
don't have to charge your maximum. Right? You just cannot charge above your maximum. So make sure your maximums reflect that. Right? The only thing that can vary would be the mileage based on the distance. These maximums also include a 10-kilometer grace of tow.
Mm.
Not sure if you had read that in there. There's a little,
Mm.
I mean, if that doesn't have a roadside written all over it, I don't know what does.
Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah.
that includes 10 kilometers of towing service in that maximum. So you got to make sure to include that mileage
Yep.
in that maximum. So these
So
maximums,
let me ask you this. So
okay,
you've done a hell of a lot more research than I have,
I've been
and
forced.
yeah, and I feel like a lot of people, since the questions I've seen, they've probably done the amount of research that I've done, which isn't a lot.
100%. They sat down for a couple hours, read it, and have more questions than answers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because in my eyes, I get frustrated. I was like, this isn't telling me anything, and I just give up. Then I wait for someone like you that has patience, anyways, um, or gets paid to do it. Anyways, um, so these are the maximum rates that you have to submit, right?
Yes.
What is stopping anyone from, once the government comes out and say these are the maximum rates that we're allowing for
Mm.
the industry to pay? What's stopping individual companies of just saying that's my maximum rate, and then they always can charge under that? Because is this maximum rate that we have to submit going to be our day-to-day rate sheet that we have to give our customers, or do we
You
have to
do not
give
have to give
customers
a
our current
day-to-day
rate
rate
sheet,
sheet.
or do we just have to give them our maximum
You have
rate?
to give them your maximum. You do not, you like, actually, it's not that you need to give me, like, by law requirement,
Hmm.
at the time of consent, you are required to give your maximum
Hmm.
rate schedule. The schedule that you build and submit, you must give it somehow to a customer every time.
Hmm.
And not a, you can give them what the service is actually going to cost them,
Yep.
but you have to fall within the maximum. Again, think of the reason of predatory towing.
Mhm.
That's what all this is always going to come back to, is predatory towing.
Yep. Don't get me
Right.
wrong. I understand. You show up on scene. You say, "Sir, ma'am, I need you to sign a form. These are rate sheets. This is the maximum that we would be able to charge. This is what I'm going to charge you.
Mhm,
I need a
mhm.
signature, and then now that price is locked in. I'm okay for that because at least they know, okay, this is how much it's going to charge. There's a legally binding document. I don't know how well it's going to hold up in court if someone actually pushes it, but it should hold up pretty good. They signed a piece of paper with pretty much their bill before prior service. I understand that, but I think they've taken it a little too far.
Surprisingly, you don't actually have to get them to sign off of what we've seen under the TISSA. TISSA does not say that you have to get them to sign off on an estimate.
Mm,
Okay.
okay.
So that is where I say, yes, there is going to be an operator out there
Mhm,
that is going to charge a granny from Walmart to a couple miles up the shop his
mhm,
maximum rate because the government said I can.
mhm.
And I have a signed consent form because how many people actually read this thing? So,
Yep.
what is required on every tow? And I say tow and recovery
Mhm,
because to my understanding and everything that I have found through the TSA Act, it does not seem to apply to roadside services, boosts, unlocks,
yep.
pretty much nothing where you fully take possession of the vehicle. And again, that is, I think, purposely built because of predatory towing,
Mhm,
right? Scenarios that happened where, gee, you broke down on the side of the 407 one time, you lost a wheel on your pickup truck.
yep.
True story. Now, a
Mhm,
tow driver just shows up out of the blue. Hey, what's going on? Oh, I lost my wheel, whatever. Hey, no problem. I'll get you hooked up. I'll get you taken care of.
yep.
Gets you off the highway, gets you to a shop that you've requested, or maybe one that he recommended.
Yep.
And you get there and he goes, okay, cool. Bill's $900. And you go, wait, what? Like, what do you mean $900? I thought this would be like 250, 300, 400, whatever
Yep.
a number that you as a consumer had in your head, which I
Yep.
mean, is part of your own fault for not finding out the price ahead of time.
Mhm,
But even a shady character who said, it'd be $400. And then you get there and he goes, nah, it's 900. Because of the extra, I had to charge you 900. Now, what are your options? Your options are to pay the tow truck driver, or he's going to bring it back to his yard and put a possessionary lien on it,
mhm,
right? A lot of that is to stop this.
mhm,
So we require on every retail tow, it does not apply again to auto clubs. They are very specific about that.
mhm. Very. Multiple
Where a
times.
service would be free and or prepaid through a membership to an automobile association.
Mhm,
Somewhere along those lines is their wording, right? It does not apply to that. So every retail tow that you get, disabled tow, accident tow,
yep.
anytime that you are either hooking up a vehicle for
Mhm.
tow where you were not called by a roadside company
Or please.
or directed by the police.
Yep.
Now, there are situations where that could be a fine line as well,
Of course.
because the police do this to us quite often. They
Mm,
call us on behalf of the customer.
mm,
So it's, hey, this is the police. We need a tow truck at here and here. Okay,
mhm.
no problem. We're on our way. We go.
Yep.
And then we get there, and it's just that, it was little Betty Boop didn't have her phone. So that isn't a order of the police. If the person is there and able to, hasn't left in an ambulance, all that good stuff, like is able to make a decision, consent is required.
Mhm.
Now, what does an industry full of 40 to 50-year-old white men have in common? They're just learning what consent is now. Um, True story. I don't care. Block it out if you want. It's a good one.
Okay.
Um, so this consent form is thorough.
Yeah.
It requires all the vehicle information, all the customer information, who gave the consent, time,
Mhm.
place. It also requires a full page, damn near, of verbiage included in the act
Yep.
that has to be put in. There's a line at the bottom that has to say, you need to know your rights before you sign this document.
Mhm.
Then you need to receive a full rate schedule, maximum rate schedule.
Yep.
And then you can sign. Now, I feel terrible for companies. I've gone to it. We have a digital dispatch platform. We are almost paperless.
Mhm.
We have found a way to integrate this very smoothly, right? Where they can sign right on a tablet that we have in the truck.
Nice.
Yeah. And all the information, because we have that information already. Anything we
Yep.
don't have, the driver just has to update on scene.
Mhm.
And not only does it update for the sake of consent, it updates for our records.
Yeah, so when you generate the call, it's got all the vehicle information that automatically just gets put over into the form that the customer then has to review and sign.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's cool.
So yes, it requires all of this. You need to give the customer. Now I know there's been that joke, and if you haven't seen the Facebook post where it's looks like a highway blocked up with cars.
I'll put
And
the
the tow
picture
truck,
up here probably for those
yeah,
YouTube
and the
folks.
tow trucks, and they say, I'll get you out in a minute. We just need to do some paperwork first. There is an extent to that.
Mhm.
But what this does is this protects the industry,
Mhm.
the customer, and the insurance companies. And so why I say this protects the insurance companies, because this is the problem. Mistakes happen.
Mhm.
The law states that if you do not have, the regulation state, if you do not have this consent form filled, and kicker, if I'm bringing it back to my yard, that's a whole other consent form. It's a second consent you require to bring it to your yard, unless, again, directed by police.
Yep.
Keep that in mind. Legislative tows fall under that as well.
Mhm.
Right? They're the only ones you don't need. Hey, I'm going to store your car for 14 days because the cop said so. Sign this consent form. You don't need that.
Hmm.
If you fail to meet this requirement in the regulations, being the consent form, being this verbiage that they call under Schedule 2, being all this information, you do not have a right to charge for services.
Mhm.
Okay. The problem with that is there is a certain group within the industry that is going to fight that on any slip up that you get. I am less worried about the police enforcing this and taking away my tow operator license because my guy made a mistake and was rushing because for whatever reasons, God knows we have enough of them,
Mhm.
right? It's going to be hard to get 100% efficiency rate on this.
Mhm.
There's going to be mistakes, but that mistake that you make or that your employee makes could be the one that the insurance is paying the bill. And you can bet your ass. You think I've read this thing a lot? They've read it even more.
Mhm. They have
Because the end,
teams going over
yeah,
this.
100%.
Yeah.
So the first thing I can almost change, now you get a call from the insurance company. Hey, it is so-and-so insurance. We're calling for an update on this vehicle. If we can get a payout, the release status of it,
Yep.
and so on and so forth. That is going to start off with, hey, we're calling about such and such vehicle. Do you have a consent form to tow? Did you also have a consent form to the store?
Mhm.
Oh, yeah, no, you can get that to me. Your driver didn't get one? Oh, that's terrible. Please release our vehicle at no charge.
Yep.
That is going to be a big problem. Like, I'm all for this stuff, but you damn well know the insurance is going to take a shot at this. Like, they are looking at this drooling, going, we're asking an industry that is so unorganized to provide records of everything. Ha!
Yep.
They're never going to do it. And there's
Yep.
going to be companies that are going to get slaughtered by this. If there is one thing that you were going to learn from this episode as a towing company in Ontario, consent forms are going to be the difference. Right? And it's not, as much as it sounds like a crazy requirement of the government, it's not the end of the world. It is things that we probably should have been doing in the past. It makes good business. Right?
Yep.
I have bigger fish to fry when it comes to the government on you tell me how much I can charge, you can approve my rate, disapprove my rate, all that stuff. I get it. But this is literally, hey, customer, I'd like to tow your vehicle. Here's what the maximum bill could be. Here's what I'm going to charge you.
Mhm.
Right? Just like a hotel. You go into a hotel room, there's a list of rates on what their maximum rate is for a room. They don't charge above that, but they can charge less than that. It's the same idea.
Yep.
Right? So it's transparency. Hey, you want to sell it as this way? Unfortunately, new regulations came. The government requires that you read this and sign it before I can touch your vehicle.
Mhm.
Oh, you don't want to sign it? Okay. Officer, she doesn't want to sign the consent form. So you're going to have to call another towing company to come get it, or you're going to have to order the tow.
Yep.
What would you like to do? Right? Like, these aren't terrible things
Mhm.
until the insurance gets their hands on them.
So we've got a lot of different slides here, and I just want to start off with one of them. This is from a Facebook group called Towers of Ontario. They've been putting out a lot of good stuff. They've been helping to get clarification on the TISSA Act for everyone. And it simply states, What do a plumber, a dentist, a mobile repair guy all have in common? They all charge minimum number of hours for emergency services. But if an Ontario towing company has a recovery job that needs to call someone in, they are now prohibited for charging a minimum number of hours, even though it may be required by law to pay the employee a minimum number of hours. Make it make sense. And then
Yes.
below it has a Gmail or a website and a Gmail account to send any questions to.
Yes. So, well, it's not a website. One of the links in there is towingatontario.ca, which is the MTO's response. I've actually sent an email off to them
Yep.
for clarification on things and got it back about 4 or 5 days. My understanding is now there's like an auto message going out, going, due to extreme backups. It may be a length of time before you get your answer. I mean, possibly you could not get an answer to a question that is required to be submitted into the portal, and that's a big concern in the industry. But yeah, so what this is referring to is on the maximum rate schedule, I discussed how there is two services, towing and recovery. Right? Towing is broken out by vehicle weight, and it's broken out by weight category and then mileage. Recovery is broken down into class of tow truck, which is very similar to a pilot project rate sheet that we had in Toronto over the time. So it's, your 80 ton and above, your 70 to 80, your, all the way down and all your sport equipment. And you must submit a maximum rate for that. Now, the big change is a lot of towing companies in Ontario, heavy towing companies, will charge a minimum hourly.
Yep.
I have seen where that hourly was normally anywhere from 2 to 4 hours.
Yep.
Right. And a lot of it depends on the type of work that it is doing. Towing tends to be a 2-hour, recovery tends to be a 4-hour. Right. Just because there's a lot more that goes into it and everything else. And it's an incentive. If I charge a 4-hour minimum for recovery and I can get that vehicle out and done in 2, I made an extra 2 hours on my trucks.
Yep.
That's a motivation to clear the highway quicker.
Yep.
The problem is predatory towing practices. Some people don't use it as a motivation. Instead, they use it as a way to overbill, where a single, 30-minute job, and we're charging 4-hour minimums. Under the new rate schedule, hourly invoicing for recoveries applies. However, there is a 1-hour minimum that can be billed. There is no more than that. It is a 1-hour minimum, and then it is billed in 30-minute increments after the first hour.
Yep.
Right? So again, this leads to a problem on honest, good companies who are no longer incentivized to clean the highway up quickly. Why would I be? Why would I rush to try and get this highway cleaned up quickly when I could push myself to the limit and do it in 2.5 or do it at a normal, steady, slower, safer pace for 4? What's my incentive? There isn't one.
To make less money?
To make more but still run the equipment. It doesn't make sense, right? Quebec did something very similar to this, except Quebec added that there was a base rate, which is kind of what you're going to see here, right? If companies are smart, you're going to see that your hourly minimum could be about like your hourly maximum will be a 2-hour. Meaning if you charge $250 an hour for a unit on a recovery, you're going to charge it at $50 an hour or $500 an hour. Then what you can do is after the first hour, you can charge it out at $250 an hour, because again, you can charge below this. You cannot charge above it. So very simple solution. Again, you charge a unit out at $250 an hour currently, right? Now, keep in mind, especially when it comes to recovery and when it comes into heavy towing, fuel surcharges are no longer allowed to be charged.
Yep. That's illegal.
It states that you are not allowed to charge for things such as fuel surcharges or admin fees, right? There's no admin cost to doing all this.
Which makes perfect sense because there's a crap ton more paperwork now.
100%. So no, you can add it into your maximum, but you cannot physically break it out on the invoice.
Which I thought they wanted more descriptive and broken out bills originally.
Agreed. So what you can do is, like I said, you bill that unit out at $250 an hour, let's say. You bill it out you set your maximum at $500 an hour. Right? You charge that first hour out at $500 and you give them a deal on the next 3 hours. Or at a time that it's out there. At least you're still getting your 2-hour minimum. I don't think they're going to care about that. I think they're going to care if you go from a $250 an hour unit to $1,000 an hour unit. But guys are gonna say, well, PlainGuy, why don't I just charge it then? If they approve 500 an hour, why don't I just charge it out at 500 an hour all the time? Hey, it's your business. You can do what you want, but keep in mind that they will be monitoring this.
Yeah.
The
And you
government,
also got to remember, on the side of the road, you got to get that consent form signed,
Yeah.
and they got to go over the rates.
yeah, well, you still got to set your maximum. If you want to do what I'm saying, you still got to set your maximum at 500 an hour.
Yeah, I know, but they also need to understand what you're charging. And if you're not the only tow operator on scene, they could window shop.
And once consent has been given to one company, it cannot be gone after by another company.
Yeah.
I don't know how we're supposed to know that another company has consent. And
You got to give them a flag to
we've
walk around
reached
with
out, yeah,
on scene.
we've reached out to the MTO asking that exact question.
Yep.
In the scenario where 2 consents are given, this recently happened to me. A company called me for a tractor trailer in the ditch. I attended this tractor trailer in the ditch. Another company was on scene. I know the company. I walked up and I said, hey, Bob, what's going on? He's like, what are you doing here? I'm like, oh, I got a call from the company to winch this out. And he goes, so did I. I'm like, what? So I'm like, who's your person? He's like, this is the name. So he calls. That's a woman. And he goes, what's your title at the company? She goes, operations manager. Okay. I call my guy. I said, hey, what's your title? Dispatch. Okay. Do you have a so-and-so that works for you? Like, or that you work for, I guess?
What?
Yeah, that's my operations manager. I guess she called a different company. Whose consent now takes
priority?
Who wins this now? Being the gentleman that I am, and very few people accusing me of that, I looked at that scenario and I went, operations trumps dispatch.
Yep.
It's all yours. But you can see where that could be a problem. So we have asked for clarification
we've seen
from
that
the
before
MTO
in the industry where people will call multiple tow trucks to see who gets there first. Just because
but I don't
you wouldn't
care.
call
I don't care
multiple
about
pizza
the
places
car
to see
broken
which
down.
pizza you get first. You wouldn't do that.
But I'm not caring about the broken down car revenue. Like those things can be absorbed. It's the 10, 15, $20,000 recovery jobs.
Yeah.
Right? It's like playing poker with your buddies for fun and playing for money. When money's on the table, things get a lot more serious and you don't have as many friends.
So let me run this situation by you.
Okay.
You get the call from the operations manager to come tow this rig, right?
Yeah.
You arrive on scene.
Yeah.
There's another tow operator already there. He has gone through the consent form with the driver of the vehicle, which is the only one present, and the form is all signed. But you got called by the actual person who should be able to give you consent to tow the vehicle.
So under the requirements for consent, and this was confusion that came up recently, and it legitimately was a question that I had for the government, and I asked them for the MTO. Because consent states everything that is required, including a signature. Now, it also says on the next section below that in the situation of verbal consent, here is the requirements. And then it says everything that was in the first section, which includes a signature, which didn't make sense, right? The math doesn't math. No. You are calling it verbal consent in the law, but also stating that I require a signature on verbal consent, which might not be practical. No. So I can read because I have the email right here and the question in front of me. The TISSA does specify the information that must be documented in the case of either method of consent. This is the information in section 33, which you are inquiring about. So I sent them the requirements. It would not be possible and therefore not expected to obtain a customer's signature when a consent is obtained verbally. On the other hand, documentation of written consent in physical or electronic form, text or email, would be expected to contain the items listed in 33(1)K and I, which is the signature. Yeah. So pretty much what they're saying is we fucked up. we forgot that part. So but you do not require a signature. So in that case, as long as I can, at the time of dispatch, send them all the call information with this consent and everything else, I can then over the phone get verbal consent. I can still get verbal consent. It is still a thing, according to TISSA and the MTO in my response to them.
Okay, so with that being said, is
insurance going to take that as consent? They're the ones that are going to really fight me on it.
Yeah, so now anytime So let's just say a hypothetical situation, different situation.
Mhm.
A driver is also being a dispatcher for an evening. He gets the office phone transferred to his cell phone so he can dispatch while he's driving.
Mhm.
He does this verbal consent thing on his phone and he
Mhm.
sends off all the appropriate paperwork and he gets verbal consent over the phone. What happens if that service doesn't go quite well enough to the party who you just provided service for and they say, I never gave consent to that? And since it was done on his personal cell phone, that call wasn't recorded.
Good luck.
Yeah.
There is no reason, right? Verbal consent, in my opinion, should be used in a situation of trucking company who's not on scene,
Hmm.
right? When a customer is not going to be on scene. Perfect example. Hey, I smoked a deer.
Hmm.
I have called the police. They have advised me to bring the vehicle to a collision reporting center. I have left the keys under the onto the console.
Hmm.
And if you can bring it there and then bring it to your yard. Yes, man. No problem. Because you are not going to be on site, I'm going to have to read off this information to you that is required under law and obtain your consent for it.
Hmm.
Fine. Go do it.
But
For the
you
amount of
also have
time.
to email them all the rate sheet first, don't you? Because they
Exactly.
need to have all that
So, okay,
information.
what's your tech guy? We live in 2023. I can send that as a link over text
Yeah.
to access. I have to give you access to it. I'm giving it to you.
Yep.
If you click the link and go look at my website and you know what I mean, or don't, that's on you.
Hmm.
Right. So, but if it's a call where, like you said, guys dispatching, okay, shows up, does the verbal consent over the phone on the way to it, and then shows up, why not have her sign while you're there? Why, like, you keep that verbal consent. Do not try, because we've looked at this every which way but sideways.
Hmm.
I wanted to do that exact same thing. I
Hmm.
wanted to get verbal consent every time to save my drivers the time on scene,
Yep.
and then went, verbal consent could be a doozy and could
Hmm.
be, something you're going to lose on.
Yep.
So do not set it as your standard practice. Set it as a secondary practice for in a situation in which you can't, because they will look at that and go,
Hmm.
were you able to get written consent? Were you on scene with the customer?
Hmm.
Yes. And yet you gave them verbal consent. Okay. I was out of, if you use paper, I was out of paper consents. I read over everything. I gave them the verbal consent. This is the date and time that I gave it, because that has to be noted. There's extra notes that have to be taken
Hmm.
when giving verbal consent,
Hmm.
including a time that it was given and which person and a contact information for them.
Hmm.
Right. So there is extra little stuff to protect yourself, but use it as a backup. Right. Because I don't want to be the guy that gets absolutely slaughtered by an insurance company because verbal consent was not quite enough.
Hmm.
So yes, use it as a backup. But if you're going, that's what I'm telling my drivers. Like, I was gonna do verbal and still have them sign, and I'm like, well, then just get them to sign.
Yep.
You got all the information there. It's readily available. TowSoft does offer a feature called, for any of you that are using TowSoft, if you've never heard of it in the States, very popular or very common because they're not available in the States yet.
Hmm.
Or they don't have a clientele in the States. But in Ontario, we've seen them.
Hmm.
And it's called disclaimers. And I've used them for tire changes,
Hmm.
reminding customers of the retorques and the responsibilities of that,
Yep.
unlock services, winch services, lowered vehicle services,
Yep.
anything where there's a higher risk of liability.
Hmm.
Again, we're not going to fight the legality of those
Hmm.
on those, disclaimers for, possible damages. But in this case, as for the government's requirement, it checks all the boxes.
Hmm.
So, I cannot say enough. That is my biggest thing. One is the rate schedule. You need to make sure that your maximums that are being submitted to the government
Hmm.
are sufficient to cover everything. Because towing, right? Heavy towing requires a maximum flat rate.
Hmm.
So that has to include, because it just goes by weight,
Hmm.
anything from a highway tractor that you can pick from the rear to a 7-axle concrete pumper, right? To a
Yep.
loaded triaxle dump truck, to the only thing that doesn't apply in there is float work.
Is float?
Well, because technically when you're hauling something on a flatbed, not a
Yep.
vehicle, not towing in that sense, but equipment
Hmm.
or lowboy, work
Yep.
isn't towing.
Yeah. So we've
It's
got
transporting.
another. We have another slide up here. Boop-a-doo. This one here is for exemptions, and it says exactly that. So we got full exemptions. Feel free to pause the video. I'll make it full screen. Can we make it full screen briefly anymore?
Um,
That doesn't work.
no.
I could post it over top if you want to pause and read through some of the exemptions here. But we've got full exemptions: a tow truck operator under the authority of service permit and number plate, for example, test driving is exempted. Um, Motor vehicle only used for personal purposes is exempted. A motorhome is exempted when it's only used for personal purposes. A commercial motor vehicle defined as subsection blah blah blah, towing one or more motor vehicles using a saddle mount configuration. Now, I'm all for loopholes. I like
Car
my
hauler.
loopholes because the towing industry has fallen into a lot of loopholes over the year.
Yes.
So, you're telling me I could run around with a gooseneck trailer and tow vehicles for money, and it's exempted because
Technically.
I'm using a trailer, a gooseneck trailer.
Mm.
Doesn't say anything about a bumper pull trailer. Apparently, those aren't. Has to
No.
be a saddle mount.
Yep.
That's what it says in there.
The following motor
The,
vehicles are not required to be operated under a tow certificate. Yeah, because you're hauling freight at that point.
yep,
You're a freight hauler.
yeah,
It also says when the origin of the tow driver exemption, when the origin of the trip begins outside of Ontario and the tow truck is passing through or dropping off a vehicle in Ontario, that applies for our Quebec neighbors and our anyone towing into the province of Ontario. You are not required to carry a permit. You are required to get a certificate if you are towing out of the province. From your trip starts from within the province.
yep.
And when directed by a police officer in an emergency situation. So I know you boxed that one, like, oh, I don't need a tow certificate if the police. Okay, so what they're doing is this is like we end up with a blizzard, the highway shut down, there's a shortage. You know what I mean? Like they can have anyone do it
Yep.
at the direction of them to clear a highway or a road. They can. Now there might be dumb cops that take that into account and do it for every little thing. But that is the gist of it. What others? Consent to tow. If the tow truck driver or towing company did not get your consent, they cannot charge you for the towing services.
Yep.
Right? That is the concern that we have, that the insurance will really bite on that one. Once you give consent, they are not allowed to make changes to the agreement. Unless the tow destination changes, that is the only thing they're allowed to change.
And that's only for the mileage.
That is only for the mileage.
Yeah.
Tow driver must take the most direct route when dropping your vehicle off at a location when that they have been instructed to bring it.
I have cripes with this.
Okay, what is your gripe with this? And I'll help.
So I pick up your vehicle. I charge you. It's going 20 kilometers. I charge you the 20 kilometers. This, that, and the other. I say to them, "Do you need the vehicle dropped off at at the shop immediately?" No, they can't get to it till Monday, anyways. Okay, cool. I'm just gonna go do a boost and an unlock quick, and then I'll drop your vehicle off. Now I can't do that.
That's bullshit. No. What that means is they can't do the old taxi trick of taking the long way around to charge you extra. They must take the most direct route. So you're billing the most direct route. Now, again, if there's a bridge closed and you have to go around, it's still the most direct route is around that bridge.
Yes, but
it's
if you go to do a boost or an unlock or whatever, and you don't go the direct route, what would be the repercussions if someone says, "Hey, they didn't take the most direct route, even though they charged me the most direct route"?
nothing.
Okay.
Why would there be repercussions to that? There's no penalty or the consumer is not put out by that.
Yeah.
There's
But
nothing.
it doesn't say have to be charged the most direct route. The most direct route when dropping off your vehicle at the location they have been instructed to bring it to. Tow drivers must take the most direct route.
There is actually something.
Now,
There is something.
these slides, aside from one of them, have all been taken from Ontario government actual page
Yeah,
under the
not
subsection saying get towing vehicle storage certificate. So this isn't from the TISSA's horse's mouth per se, but this is what me as just a single guy would go, oh, it's the Ontario.ca's official webpage. That's where I would get most of my information from because, hey, it's Ontario and this is happening in
A
Ontario.
tow truck driver shall tow a motor vehicle by the most direct route reasonably possible in the circumstances and in the most efficient manner to the location specified by the person giving consent for the towing of the vehicle or the person who directed the removal of the vehicle. Most direct route reasonably possible in the circumstances. It allows the variation for that. You cannot charge to tow it around the block.
No.
And do 8 loops around and go, look, I towed it 17 kilometers to get, 2
Mhm.
kilometers away. That is, again, you got to remember what the law is written as.
Yeah.
Because who
But
complains in that? Who
it's also
complains in that?
making so you get a customer and says, I want it dropped off at this shop and I broken down on the side of the road. I only live 20 minutes away. Would you be able to drive me home? You can't charge
Okay.
mileage for that.
That is actually a whole other thing and actually included specifically in the law.
Oh, okay.
Yes, you cannot charge extra
hmm
to bring a customer to any other location but the drop site. It does not say that you cannot bring the customer home,
hmm
but you cannot charge for it.
No.
That is actually a written out specific sector, not under this.
hmm
Is that you cannot charge for that. You cannot charge an extra service or extra charge for bringing them home. It only includes then that's how they can keep consistency in the billing to not go, oh, I brought them home. That's why there's an extra 5 kilometers on there.
Yeah.
They have made that abundantly clear.
Yes.
Photographs of your vehicle if recovery service are provided. So yes, this does apply and to fall into the category of recovery. Photos of the vehicle in the position in which it is in needs to be taken. If you're not taking photos right now with insurance companies, the way things have gone in Ontario, you're already behind the 8 ball.
But
we
this
don't
is
go.
drivers must take photos of the vehicle for recovery services. You can still take photos of anything else you want.
Yeah, if recovery services are provided, yes.
Well, you can still take photos of the vehicle if you're just towing it
100%.
too.
You should. But I'm just saying you must in order to bill under the recovery side of things. It's to, again, keep guys from saying, oh, the vehicle was up on a curb, or over a guardrail and it was $7,000 to recover with no proof. Again, you got to remember what these, throughout this whole thing, remember what these were written for.
Yep.
Right? Again, this breaks it down that how the subject to subsection 2 and 3, no towing service other than the following shall be set up in the form mentioned. The form mentioned is the maximum rate schedule. And that is towing and recovery. Those are the two. Under those, the director may divide the towing services set out in paragraph 1 into separate services on the form based on the following criteria, but shall not otherwise divide them into separate services. So you have 2 services, towing and recovery, and in those, they are based on a set of 4 criteria. The type, capacity, characteristics of the tow truck used to tow the motor vehicle, right? So that's the classification of your truck. The weight and characteristics of the motor vehicle being towed. Now, the characteristics apply to the state in which the vehicle is in, damaged or undamaged. It's yet to be determined. The distance the motor vehicle is towed and the geographical region in which the towing service was provided. Now, I kind of put myself in a bad spot here because I can't read this bottom line that I kind of want to read. So I will move that very quickly. Recovery, right? This is the big difference between towing and recovery. Recovery means specialized service, including the use of extrication devices, winches, and skilled personnel that are required to relocate or reposition a motor vehicle to prepare it for towing, but does not include the use of standard towing equipment in respect of an upright motor vehicle that is located in a parking lot or on private property, on a roadway or shoulder, or at a location where it can be returned to a roadway or shoulder by using standard towing equipment or a winch if the distance that the motor vehicle is required to be moved by the winch is less than 5 meters. Okay, so there's a lot to take in. What it is saying is you cannot charge for a upright motor vehicle if it is in a parking lot, a roadway, or shoulder, or in any location. You cannot charge recovery rates. You go back to your towing service. Or any distance in which it is over 5 meters away, needs to be winched over 5 meters to a roadway. So
Less than
if
less than
that
5 meters.
vehicle is 10 feet into a ditch, because I know a lot of Americans listen and go, what's a meter?
Hmm.
Okay. A meter is like 3 feet, give or take. 3 point something feet.
No.
So if that vehicle is 10 feet into the ditch, 10 feet away from the road, and requires a winch and a tow, and it still falls under your towing service.
Yeah, you can't charge for that winch.
It is
It's
not a
a
recovery.
common one. Someone pulls over to
No.
take a
It's not
squirt
that you
on.
can't charge for that winch. Is that it does not fall under a recovery service, meaning your billing goes back to that towing maximum we talked about,
Mm,
and not to your hourly recovery breakdown. Again, towing is all set up on a base with mileage
mhm,
maximums. Recovery is set out as an hourly.
mm,
So that is the clear definition of how to get to recovery or to get to towing.
mm.
Notice it also says of an upright motor vehicle or an upright vehicle, actually
Yep,
upright motor vehicle, meaning
yep,
if the car is on a road but on its roof, it goes into recovery,
mm,
or on its side if it is upright. In other words, your car that is smashed in the middle of an intersection no longer it isn't it never was in the first place, let's be honest, but does not qualify as recovery.
mm.
Right? It is simply towing.
Yep.
Right. So, is there anything else? Yeah. So, Towers of Ontario. If you haven't already, check out their Facebook page. Um, I've been little disappointed in certain groups within the industry on how this is. This is all personal. Personally disappointed in how some groups and representatives of the company or the industry have kind of been behind the eight ball. Towers of Ontario has kind of came out and has done some wonderful things.
Mhm.
So any questions that I think you had it on the first slide. I'll go back to it. Any questions that you may have for the MTO, please send to the MTO, and also include towersofontario@gmail.com. And what that does, it just allows them to keep a certain level of record.
Mhm.
So they can see questions and replies that are coming back, so they can gather all this information, put it together for the betterment of the industry. There's a lot to it. That is literally the tip of the iceberg of TISSA.
There's lots of questions, and this episode's getting a little bit long, but
Mhm.
there is one more thing that I do want to talk about briefly here.
Okay.
This is a question to the ministry regarding tolls.
Okay.
This is one of those things that they sent an email to the ministry, and they also sent it to Towers of Ontario. So Towers of Ontario was able to provide the feedback to this.
Okay.
We are in a border town and regularly cross the border for towing purposes, especially for trucks. The toll border fees can be costly per axle for both trucks and theirs. In addition, towing across the border requires additional insurance, permits, etc. It is my understanding that I can no longer charge customers fees for this in my pricing and have to include these amounts in my base rates. Please confirm, as this would elevate the cost for all of my customers, even those who are not crossing the border. The answer was provided, and it reads, yes, you are correct, as only those items contained in the maximum rate schedule are billable. Toll fees, insurance costs, and the like cannot be included on the customer's invoice. As you indicate, operators should consider operational costs when determining the maximum rates they will file with the ministry. The rates you file for the operation maximum rate schedule should reflect the maximum rates you might charge for a service. However, you are not prohibited from changing with a lower amount.
Yeah, so that is exactly kind of what we talked about early on in the billing side of things. It is another thing that you need to take into account when making your maximum. And
Mhm.
again, that is hard because it can change.
You got to
Right?
think about the
First of all,
absolute worst case
yeah,
scenario out there.
yeah.
So they're broken down on a toll road like the 407,
Mm.
and you can't get on close because one of those bridges is down. So you got to travel 20 kilometers down the 407 to pick
No,
up
again,
them up.
mileage is the only thing you don't have to take into account
Yes, but you're still
because
paying the
mileage is
toll
broken down.
fee
Yeah. Oh, okay.
on that
Yeah, fair enough.
mileage,
I get what you're
right?
saying. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You have to pay the toll fee to travel down that toll road. And then you got to pick them up, and then you got to toll them off, right? That's an added expense that one customer only would normally have to pay for. But now you got to include that into your maximum because that is a possibility service.
Well,
a
still only
possible-
that one customer is going to pay for that because, again, it says you can charge less, but yes, you have to take it into account in your maximum.
Mhm.
Right. But, and again, in a situation like that, it probably, if you've already got, let's say, traffic control built into your maximum,
Mhm.
and, you know, okay, that needs traffic control too. Is it going to need a winch? Like, yeah, if you think you're going to need it, throw the maximum at it. The fear is that the government will take all these rates. They're not dumb. They're going to collect all this information. Then they're going to set what they see as a reasonable rate across the province eventually.
Mhm.
So be smart with your maximum rates. Remember they are maximums.
Mhm.
Right? If I can leave anyone with anything today, be smart about this. The portal opens on January 15th. You can find it through the Ontario website.
Which is yesterday for you fine folks.
Yes. Yesterday or day before,
Yep.
depending on when you're listening. And your rates need to be submitted by January 31st. If not, you are right. That section under your billables will be calculated as zero, which could lead to issues with the insurance companies if you do try and bill for any service that you didn't submit.
Mhm.
So on behalf of myself, my wonderful co-host, Mr. TowManG, we thank you for joining us for another episode of the Towing Life podcast. I'm sorry it was so much jargon and legal blah, 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 blah. I promise we will try and find a way to make up with it with some fun before we get into another episode of the storage side of things and all of the loopholes and everything that come with it. So if you are a tower in Ontario, please do your homework, read the legislation. We will put links in the description to all, the act and the regulations. Do your homework, find out, don't always trust what you see on the internet. Go to the government site, get the real facts. So
It's still on the internet.
Yep, it is on the internet, but it's in a much more. Don't go to Fox News to figure this out, okay? I like Fox News. They're fun, but do not go to them for this. On behalf of myself, Mr. TowManG, take care. Be safe.
Toodles.